Now it appears that potentially they might have had some sort of breakthrough in agreeing to removing IDF forces from a certain segment of the Gaza Strip and remaining in others. It's unclear exactly what that looks like.
Protesters chanting elections now. They've been on the streets of Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities rallying against the government and demanding a deal to release hostages in Gaza. Opponents of Benjamin Netanyahu claim 100,000 people took part. Police forcibly dispersed the crowds. Let's speak to our reporter Zach Anders, who's in Tel Aviv. Huge numbers on the streets then. These were people who were primarily against Netanyahu's government and the way that he is dealing with the war.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all lining up with, of course, this is the 6-month mark this morning, and the prospect that could potentially open up the hostage negotiations. This was to the crowd pushing that as close as they could to the finish line. These are people I think that are reflective of the majority of the Israeli population that are willing to see a deal done really at any cost. What happened last night as well, there was a car ramming with 1 arrest, 5 injured. So there is also frustration on the other side in how divisive the Israeli society has become in the last 6 months. Has been incredible to watch, but very tough scenes. And it was captured on video too, a remarkable video of the driver with multiple people in his car interacting with police, getting out of his car. The police officer pushes him back in his car and says, "No, you need to go." And then he drives through the crowd and injures 5.
Gosh, and all of this, of course, the backdrop, as you say, is the 6-month anniversary of those attacks by Hamas and the pain that those hostage families are still going through. And not least, just really exemplified by the sister of the Israeli hostage whose body was discovered yesterday, saying that she does directly blame the Israeli Prime Minister.
Yeah, and this one also to the Israeli public is very difficult because this is one of the men who was shown on one of the early hostage videos. So the thought was that he was still alive inside Gaza, and there's been for the 133 now that remain. That there's also been a large segment of those who there's never been proof of life. And the Israeli public hasn't been told by the Israeli government whether or not some of these hostages, including the Bibas family, which has the youngest hostage who was taken in under a year old at the time and has now had his first birthday and since being inside the Gaza Strip. But no definitive proof of life given for many of these hostages. So when this man was shown in one of the videos, it was proof that he was still alive inside Gaza. So, that, of course, the family's very upset that he has since been killed.
Mm. What is the sense we're getting about negotiations and the possibility of a deal? Because Benjamin Netanyahu has been so strong on this. Is there a sense that that is starting to change? Is he starting to listen to public opinion?
It appears from some of the reports that from the Israeli channels, the government reporters, they seem to have a feeling that this today is going to be a bit more than the delegation is going to have a bit more wiggle room than they had before, not on the Palestinian prisoner release front, but potentially on some of the military movement. The Hamas red line from the beginning of these negotiations was a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip. Now it appears that potentially they might have had some sort of breakthrough in agreeing to removing IDF forces from a certain segment of the Gaza Strip and remaining in others. It's unclear exactly what that looks like. But the pressure is certainly there. And I should mention, too, that yesterday, at least 4 IDF soldiers were killed, bringing the death toll there to 260. All of those soldiers were under 21 years old. One of them was 21. The rest were 20 years old. The Israeli public, again, at the 6-month mark, they are suffering losses that they were told, or at least there was some sort of unspoken assumption that the operation inside Gaza for them would not last this long. They knew it was going to be very difficult, but they did not feel, I think, when I had conversations with everyday people on the streets, 5 months ago, no one felt like this would be stretching out this far into the new year.
Mhm. We're reporting this morning the comments from the British Foreign Secretary David Cameron saying that Britain's support for Israel is not unconditional. We also know, of course, there's been pressure this week exerted on Benjamin Netanyahu from the US administration. How is that greeted generally in Israel? Do people feel that because they, as a society, many of them are being critical of Benjamin Netanyahu, it's okay for there to be foreign powers being critical of them? Or do they feel that maybe people are not being as supportive of Israel as they feel that they maybe should be?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's a mix. I think that there is it's framed somewhat as a big brother, little brother relationship a lot of the time. And there's a bit of an eye roll, especially over the weekend when President Biden has that phone call. And then there's a lot of movement on the aid front and the opening of crossings. And this is framed and spoken about as, well, we have to do these things. Otherwise, the U.S. threat of policy changes becomes a reality, and we don't know what that looks like. So while there's a lot of anger pointed at Netanyahu's direction, it's also discussed in this dynamic of he, although is the ultimatum in Israel, in this battlefield, the U.S. sometimes has the final say.
Tell us also, Zach, how today is being marked in Israel. It's, as you say, it's 6 months to the day since those Hamas attacks, and many people in Israeli society thought that the war wouldn't be going on this long. What are people doing to mark this day?
Well, there's going to be more demonstrations. We're going to see hostage families speak once again. I will be traveling down to Kibbutz Be'eri, which is one of the initial massacre sites. And you can expect that they're going to be replaying the images of October 7th on television, as well as the names of those killed all day long. And it's a very difficult day, heavy day uh, for everyone here in this entire region. I mean, it represents change for so many lives. The moments that came after, I remember I arrived here on October 9th, and by then the IDF had already started bombing Gaza. And now, as you reflect and you look back at how fast from the moments of the initial massacre, it's about 8 in the morning here, and 6 months ago, people were waking up at 8 in the morning to the initial infiltration through the border fence. The festival had already experienced Hamas gunmen opening fire on young people at that festival and made it into several communities. And then this would be the day that would last more than 24 hours before they felt like the situation was under control. And when I arrived on the 9th, the IDF had already begun bombing Gaza. So I think a lot of people forget how close it was in this timeline when Israel was attacked. They didn't fully understand the scope of that attack. They didn't have a handle on the situation, but they had already started bombing Gaza as a result. And that has been a constant since October 7th till today.